Hey family. Hey everybody. Today I'm going to be reading from Matthew chapter 7. I'm going to start in verse 24. And these are the words of Jesus. Listen to what he says. He says, "Anyone who listens to my teachings and follows it is wise like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Although the rains come and the torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against the house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and does not obey it is foolish, like a person who builds his house on the sand. When the rains come and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against the house, it will collapse with a mighty crash." See, Jesus is teaching us, listen, the way of the believer, the way of the one who follows Jesus is the way of obedience. And Jesus says it's obedience with a purpose. It's obedience for a reason. You see, as parents, sometimes we want our kids to obey just because we're annoyed at them. Or sometimes we want our kids to obey because I just don't feel like doing the dishes right now, so you do them. We're imperfect parents, but that is not the way of God. God is not an imperfect parent. He is perfect. And so when he calls us to obedience, when Jesus calls us to obedience, it's not for his benefit. It's not because he doesn't feel like doing the dishes today. It is because he knows that when we live a life of obedience, it is for our best. That God has created this world. He's created this world that we live in, and there's a way to live it. And when we live it his way, it is the best way. And any other way from living this life in obedience to God, it is detrimental to us. It is not the best way that we can live. In fact, the word says that when we don't live the way God intended us to live, that we become slaves to our sin. It always leads to death, but living a life of obedience to God will always lead to life, always lead to a life that is full. And I love this. Jesus says, look, when you obey me, you have a foundation for your life that cannot be shaken. And so what does Jesus teach? See, it is wise to obey him, and it is foolish to know his words and not obey them. It's foolish to think that when Jesus tells us to be generous and we're not generous, it's going to be the best thing for us. It's foolish to think that when Jesus tells us to turn the other cheek and we don't turn the other cheek and we go after vengeance, that it's going to be best for us. It's hard to believe that when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, and then we turn around and we hate our neighbor because of the decisions they're making or the way they treat us, that it's going to be best for us. Jesus says you're a fool if you know what to do, and you know to be generous, and you know to love your neighbor, and you know to turn the other cheek, and you know to do all these things and you don't do them. It's like building a house on a terrible foundation, and the storms are going to come. We get this in Alaska. We understand the value of a good foundation. We don't get a lot of floods rising up in our area, but we do get a lot of earthquakes, and our houses shake. And if we don't have good foundations, many of us experienced this just a few years ago. If we don't have good foundations, it is detrimental to our homes. And if we don't obey Jesus and live a life of obedience to him, it will be detrimental to our lives. So let's obey the words of Christ. Let's lean on the Holy Spirit to give us the strength we need. Because the truth is, our earthly flesh, our sinful nature doesn't want to obey Christ. It's a battle just to obey him every day. But the Holy Spirit in you desires to obey Christ. And so lean on the Holy Spirit. Love you guys. Have a great day.